The situation in Gaza has been described as a catastrophe on all levels. A death toll over 34,500 Palestinians. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Authority says most are women and children, and this isn't contradicted by any neutral international observers. Since Hamas shocked the world with the brutality of its cross-border attack on southern Israel, the world's sympathies have somehow shifted. The clear horror of how Hamas killed at least 1,200 Israeli civilians on October the 7th has now been surpassed by the sheer scale of death and destruction to which Israel has subjected the Gaza Strip and the Palestinian people. Hamas has had assistance militarily from its allied entities, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen and Iran. Iran even launching an all-out attack on Israel, 300 drones and missiles on April the 13th. But what about the other help that's desperately needed? We're reporting on how the UAE is taking some 2,000 Palestinian children from the hospitals of Gaza destroyed or badly damaged by the Israeli bombardment. But since October the 7th, many observers are reporting on a lack of commitment from Arab states to help the Palestinians. Here to discuss this and evaluate that situation, Khaled Elgindy, Programme Director on Palestine and Palestinian-Israeli Affairs at the Middle East Institute in Washington. A very good evening to you, and thank you for joining us here on France 24 for this apropos segment. Is it fair to say, sir, that Arab states are not helping the Palestinians?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say that Arab states aren't helping enough, but I don't think it's accurate to say that they're not helping at all. I mean, there are delegations of doctors and others from different Arab states. At diplomatic level, Arab states have pushed for a ceasefire, have condemned Israeli moves in Rafah in very strong terms. But certainly there's much more that can be done. And part of the problem here is that Arab states are constrained largely as a result of their relationships with the United States. So this is, there's an unwillingness to take very harsh action, like recalling ambassadors or imposing some kind of sanctions on their relationship with Israel, mainly out of fear of the United States, more than it is a concern for Israel. But this is the geopolitics of the region.
Indeed, it is a very complicated situation, and simple questions often don't have very simple answers. You mentioned this relationship with the US. Clearly, that must dictate how Egypt reacts.
Oh, very, very much so. I mean, the centerpiece of the Egypt-Israeli relationship is the U.S. brokered peace treaty from 1979. Between Egypt and Israel. And Egypt has said in very clear terms that if there is a full-blown invasion in Rafah, and already we've seen Israel take over the border crossing between Gaza and Egypt, all of these things, Egypt has expressed its alarm and have said that this jeopardizes that long-standing treaty with Israel. And that is, of course, a major concern for the United States. Whether we still haven't seen a major response from Egypt, anything dramatic, for example, severing ties with Israel or canceling its peace treaty with Israel, but all of those have certainly been raised and are intended to raise the alarm in Washington as well.
But there are many Arab states who haven't gone as far as, say, recalling an ambassador or making any kind of protest in that sense. You can understand how people looking at this from the outside feel rather perplexed that this is happening or rather isn't happening.
Yes, it's true. I think everyone who looks at this situation is perplexed. One, at the sheer scale, the enormity of the destruction and death that you highlighted in your report just a moment ago, and two, that it's lasted this long. I don't think anyone expected the war to continue as long as it has, and I think that includes even the Biden administration. I think everyone would like to wrap this up, but the problem is the United States, the Biden administration in particular, has sort of from the early days since October 7th painted itself into a corner. and it has been reluctant to use the kind of leverage that it had, and that only now it is starting to use that leverage, specifically with regard to withholding certain kinds of weapons, the most destructive weapons like the 2,000-pound bombs that have really destroyed most of Gaza. I mean, this to a lot of people will seem like it's very late. I mean, this is the sort of measure that could have been taken many months ago. There's no question that everybody understood the kind of damage that was being inflicted, and the president himself has said that U.S. weapons have been used to kill civilians. So why is it taking? Why did it take 7 months to come to this decision to prevent those weapons from reaching Israel? I mean, that's part of the difficulty in understanding how we got here.
Going back before October the 7th, before the world changed in that sense, there was a process beginning about Israel normalizing ties with Arab states. I'm thinking Saudi Arabia, for instance. And at that point, the question was raised, well, what's in this for the Palestinian people? Is Saudi Arabia turning its back on the Palestinian people? You know, there was no kind of special caveat put on that deal to get something for the people in the West Bank, the people in the Gaza Strip. Is this part of a kind of ambivalence in some states towards the Palestinian cause? And is it, as I think you're suggesting, all linked to US influence?
It's not necessarily all linked to U.S. influence, but yes, I think there has been an ambivalence in the Arab world, particularly over the last 15 years, and most notably since the Arab uprisings more than a decade ago. And the region has changed. Its priorities, the regimes have changed in many cases. There is a growing authoritarianism in the region. There is an authoritarian order that has emerged in an alliance with Israel, that there is a convergence of interests between a very increasingly illiberal and authoritarian Israel and an authoritarian Arab state system led by Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and of course Egypt and others. And in that formation, the Palestinian issue got sidelined. Many people had allowed themselves to believe that the Palestinian issue was a thing of the past, that the world and the region had moved on, and that everyone had to look after their interests, and that the Palestinians could be sidelined. I think what October 7th demonstrated was that the Palestinians could not be sidelined. And they would find a way to assert themselves into the equation, and that's what's happened.
Jordan is a country with a large Palestinian influence and population, but when Iran was attacking Israel, Jordan assisted in shooting down the Iranian drones and missiles. Now, I know there's no simple answer to this as to why that happens, and it is a complicated issue, but my question is kind of simple. From a layman's perspective, how does that happen?
Well, it happens when you have a regime that is somewhat detached from public opinion. A majority of Jordan's population are Palestinian. There was quite a lot of anger at the decision by Jordan to participate in that counterattack, I suppose, and to shoot down Iranian missiles. I suppose one argument for the regime in Jordan would be, this was happening over Jordanian airspace. They had to defend the sovereignty of the state, which is not an unreasonable argument. But the fact that they did it voluntarily and openly, I think, suggests there was more going on there. And Jordan is one of these regimes that is highly dependent on the United States and other major powers for its survival. So it's a delicate balancing act that these regimes have to try and walk, because on the one hand, they understand that whatever they may think of the Palestinian issue, their publics, by and large, are very supportive of the Palestinian cause. public opinion has been very much inflamed by the images of death and destruction, and babies being pulled out of rubble and dismembered families. I mean, all kinds of atrocities that we've seen over the last 7 months. Those have deeply affected the public in Jordan and Egypt, across the Arab world. And so these regimes have to walk a difficult line between paying attention to the sentiments of their people, but also pursuing their narrow strategic interests as they view them. And in this case, Jordan had an interest in preventing an attack from Iran.
Khaled, I'm out of time, but I've got to ask you this question. The UAE, United Arab Emirates, has taken some 2,000 children who needed special help because the hospitals have been destroyed in Gaza. Are you surprised that more Arab states aren't extending that kind of help?
Well, I mean, I don't know the full scale of who is and who isn't taking Palestinian children. Part of the problem is on the Gaza side, on the Palestinian side, because I know many people who've inquired about fostering children or bringing children out of Gaza. Part of the problem is you have 17,000 unaccompanied or orphan children. People are not entirely sure if their parents have been killed, or they're simply missing, or in a different camp than they are. And so people are reluctant to move ahead with relocating Palestinian children without definitively knowing the whereabouts of their parents. So that's a complicating factor, I think, in these kinds of efforts. But I don't think that there is any shortage of sympathy or outpouring of sympathy for Palestinians in Gaza, although there may be restrictions put in place by their governments as to the kinds of assistance that they can offer.
Khaled Elgindy, we need to leave it there. Programme Director on the Palestine and Palestinian-Israeli Affairs Desk of the Middle East Institute in Washington. Thank you, sir, for your time and answering my questions, which did bounce around a lot, but you clearly gave us the best assessment and the best analysis. Thank you so very much indeed for shedding light on that situation for us here in Apropos. We take a very short break.